how do we really know what's true when the very information we rely on, from public sources is shifting right under our feet, sometimes without even a trace?
It's a fundamental question, really.
It is. And today we're taking a deep dive into some crucial findings that directly address it. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, we're unpacking a new report. It's titled Climate of Suppression, Environmental Information under the Second Trump Administration. It just came out from the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, EDGI, on August 6th, 2025.
And the why behind this deep dive? Well, it's critically important for you, the listener. Think about it. Accurate, reliable government information. It's foundational, isn't it, for a functioning democracy?
Absolutely. It's what allows people to scrutinize, to debate, and ultimately to influence what the government does.
Exactly. And federal websites, that's how the government mostly talks to us these days. Billions of visits every year. And we've kind of traditionally thought of them as pretty solid, trustworthy sources.
But here's the core problem, and it's a pretty profound one. Unlike, say, a printed book or report,
Right.
web information can be rewritten or just removed with no warning, no label saying this is change, no archive necessarily. And there are remarkably few official policies governing federal website content, which makes it incredibly vulnerable to suppression and, well, frankly, to rewriting history.
So our mission today is to really unpack what EDGI found. We want to reveal the key insights about these changes, these shifts.
Yeah, why they matter and what they truly mean for your ability to stay informed on critical environmental issues.
All right, let's get started then. So who exactly is sounding the alarm here? Who are these watchdogs tracking all this, and how do they even manage to illuminate changes that seem almost designed to be hidden?
Well, EDVI, the Environmental Data and Governance Initiative, they're a North American network. They're really committed to promoting open, accessible government data and, evidence-based policymaking. Yeah. Think of them as like digital archivists and analysts working pretty diligently behind the scenes to make sure public information actually stays public and transparent.
And how do they do it? It sounds like a huge job, especially if these changes are happening so quietly, almost invisibly.
It absolutely is. Their website governance team, they actively monitor over 4,000 federal environmental web pages.
4,000, wow.
Yeah, across more than 13 agencies. The big ones: EPA, NOAA, DOE, CDC, FEMA, DOT. Now, that's actually only about 20% of what they monitored during the first Trump administration, but it's still a significant sample, enough to spot the major trends.
Okay, so they're tracking changes. What's the method? How does that actually work on a practical level?
They use a mix: custom software combined with manual review. They meticulously track changes in the actual content, the language used, and also access to the information itself.
Okay, so saving different versions.
Exactly, like a digital library of snapshots over time so you can compare. And it's important they distinguish between content changes.
Like changing a word.
Yeah, like swapping climate change for, say, extreme weather. And then there are access changes.
Which is just gone.
Right. Removing a whole web page, or maybe just the links to that information. Both are significant, obviously, but one literally makes the information just vanish.
Okay, so with that kind of detailed monitoring, what was the most striking thing EDGI noticed right away? What immediately jumped out about these website changes?
The sheer speed. And the scope. It was, well, truly astonishing, according to the report.
Speed and scope.
Yeah. They found that in President Trump's first 100 days in 2025, EDGI observed 70% more website changes compared to the first 100 days back in 2017.
70% more, even though they were monitoring fewer pages this time.
Exactly. Fewer pages, way more changes. It shows a huge acceleration.
So what was the pace like day to day? Was it immediate?
It started immediately, January 20th, 2025, day one. Nearly 100 web page changes just in that first week.
100 in the first week.
The pace was highest in the first month, averaging about 42 changes per week during those first 100 days. It dropped a bit later, down to maybe 22 per week. But overall, in the first 6 months, 879 important changes cataloged.
Wow.
On 639 different federal web pages.
879 changes. And what's striking there isn't just the number, but you mentioned content versus access changes. How did that break down? Was it mostly one or the other?
It was actually pretty balanced, which is interesting in itself. They logged 649 content changes altering words, phrases.
Okay.
And 605 access changes, things removed, links broken.
Right.
And in 372 cases, it was both. content and access changes on the same page.
So it's like a dual strategy, rewriting what's there and making things disappear entirely.
Seems that way. The rapid rate is definitely notable, but that combination really paints a picture of comprehensive information control.
All right, let's move into the specifics then. One of the most, well, alarming findings in the report is how environmental justice, EJ, and equity information became such a primary target. Hit first, hit hardest. What drove that immediate focus?
That's right. I mean, the Biden administration had really pushed this whole-of-government approach to environmental and climate justice.
Mm-hmm.
But President Trump's Day 1 executive order, Foreseen 151, titled Ending Radical and Wasteful DEI Programs and Preferencing, it explicitly rejected that approach.
Day 1 again.
Day 1. And there were other EOs, too, like 44154, Unleashing American Energy, and 14173, Ending Illegal Discrimination, which also revoked earlier environmental justice directives. These EOs acted as direct catalysts, signaling a very clear shift in priorities right from the start.
So these executive orders basically gave the green light. What did that actually look like online? Are we talking about small tweaks or whole websites just vanishing? Give us some examples.
It was profound. The rapid removal of central EJ and DEI websites was quite stark. The day after the inauguration, the Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, they removed the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, CEJST.
The main tool for identifying disadvantaged communities, right?
The very one. Gone. Within 1 month, all 9 federal equity screening tools were removed, including EPA's main one, EJ Screen.
All 9 in a month.
Yep. And get this. By mid-February 2025, the report states that no federal agencies had environmental justice websites or web pages available to the public.
That's incredible. Just weeks into the administration, no federal EJ websites were findable.
That's what EDGI found. Specific examples. Environmentaljustice.gov completely removed. The Department of Justice's EJ site archived. The Fish and Wildlife Service EJ subdomain just showed content not available. The HHS Office of Climate Change and Health Equity, OCCHE, deleted. And then on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2025, the EPA's entire ep.gov environmental justice subdomain completely removed.
Wow.
The report uses this direct quote, "The Trump administration effectively removed all information about environmental racism from federal websites." That really speaks to the speed and the thoroughness.
So beyond just deleting whole sites, there was also this significant language shift you mentioned, deleting and replacing key terms. What did that look like, and what's the impact when you just change the words?
We saw it across the board, yeah. Take the EPA's Climate Resilience and Adaptation Funding Toolbox, CRFT. On its definitions page, they systematically stripped out terms like climate equity, climate justice, disadvantaged community, environmental justice, Justice 40, workforce development.
Basically all the key concepts.
Pretty much. They even altered the definition of vulnerable community, so it no longer mentioned income or race, which, interestingly, deviates from how it was defined in the government's own 5th National Climate Assessment.
So it's not just tweaking, it's fundamentally changing the meaning.
It seems like a surgical removal of the language that connects environmental issues to social fairness.
Yeah.
It effectively erases the idea of systemic inequality from these federal resources just by changing the vocabulary.
So it's a two-pronged approach then. Outright removal. And then if something is left, redefining terms to shift the meaning. That feels, yeah, insidious is the word.
Precisely. Sometimes environmental justice was replaced with vaguer phrases like community-scale action or just best practices.
Much less specific.
Right. Vulnerable became at risk or disaster-prone. Equitable and sustainable turned into innovative. In some cases, even the word community itself was removed from EPA pages. Though it's worth noting, sometimes the broader information about impacts on different populations remained, just without those specific keywords. For example, one EPA page changed environmental justice and equity to population impacts, but some of the underlying text about those impacts stayed.
This pattern, it extended beyond just specific EJ terms, didn't it? To broader info removal and making access harder.
Yes, absolutely. Information about unequal climate impacts on vulnerable groups, deleted from NOAA education pages, examples of community-based initiatives or adaptation strategies, removed from EPA and NOAA pages. And it wasn't just the content, it was also about equitable access for different groups of people.
What's specifically about equitable access? I think the report mentioned changes related to non-English content.
That's a clear example, yeah. Executive Order 14224, the one designating English as the official language. Well, that led to the EPA removing non-English language names from its website footer.
Okay.
Spanish PDFs were removed. Spanish links vanished from other agency sites like the Department of Energy. There was also the removal of references to the EPA's Advisory Council for Historically Black Colleges and Universities and Minority Serving Institutions, the HBCU MSI Council. That followed another EO, 14283, and even links to diverse affinity groups. African Americans, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, Hispanics, Native Americans, LGBTQ+ scientists, those were removed from an EPA page titled What Kind of People Work at EPA.
This really underscores the importance of those data tools you mentioned earlier. Things like CJST for identifying communities for funding and EJ Screen for mapping concerns. When those disappear, what's the real-world impact?
Their removal is deeply concerning. These weren't just abstract tools. They were vital for public understanding and, crucially, for the ability to act on environmental injustices.
Right.
If those mapping tools are gone, it fundamentally changes how communities can even identify where the problems are, let alone advocate for themselves. It really cuts off access at the knees.
So the data is just lost.
Well, thankfully, EDGI and some partner groups, like the Public Environmental Data Partners, they've managed to archive and restore some of these tools and data online. There's a site, screening-tools.com, for example.
Okay, that's good to know.
And there have been legal challenges, too. Several public interest groups sued, which actually led to the CDC's Environmental Justice Index being put back online.
Oh, interesting. So litigation can work.
Sometimes. But even then, the restored CDC page now carries this disclaimer banner. It states that the Trump administration rejects gender ideology and that the information does not reflect biological reality. So, restored, but with a very prominent asterisk.
Right.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit now to climate change information. Unlike EJ, the report says climate info was treated more variably. What were the major deletions here? This seems like another huge area.
It is, and the most significant alteration, according to the report, was the removal of the entire U.S. Global Change Research Program website.
Yeah.
USGCRP, that's globalchange.gov. It went offline on July 1st, 2025.
Globalchange.gov. Wasn't that the home of the National Climate Assessment, the big congressionally mandated report?
Exactly. It hosted the NCA, which is this crucial resource synthesizing all the science, plus a lot of other climate education materials. Now, static PDF versions of past NCAs are apparently still findable in NOAA's repository.
Okay.
And civil society groups did manage to archive the site content to preserve public access. But importantly, work on the next assessment, the sixth NCA, which was due in 2028, that was halted. The authors were dismissed.
Wow. So that's a huge blow, not just to accessing past information, but to the ongoing scientific assessment process itself.
Precisely.
What about other key climate sites? Any other major changes? Yes. NOAA's main climate site, climate.gov. It had been their premier climate information hub for like 15 years.
Right, I remember that site.
On June 24th, 2025, it started redirecting users to a different page, NOAA.gov Climate. And then the entire climate.gov content production staff was terminated, effective July 1st.
The whole staff.
The whole team. So resources like NOAA's 2024 Climate Literacy Guide, removed back in early February. All the materials from climate.gov's Teaching Climate section, gone by early April. We also saw the Department of Transportation's Climate Sustainability subdomain disappear. And extensive USDA climate change web pages were deleted too, although some of those were later restored after farmers sued.
So even though NOAA actually has a legal mandate, statutory authority, to provide climate change information, its main public resources were still taken down. That seems contradictory.
It does. And the report points out something fascinating.
Yeah.
Information about NOAA's statutory authority to provide climate info was actually added to some NOAA pages in March 2025.
Yeah.
They detail their obligation to provide reliable climate information.
So they added text saying we have to do this.
And then remove the main ways they were doing it, yeah. It highlights this real tension between existing laws or mandates and these new directives, or maybe just a reinterpretation of how those mandates get fulfilled.
Were any climate information resources left largely untouched? Did anything survive this sweep?
Yes, some agencies' climate info remained minimally impacted, at least according to the report's timeframe. For instance, the EPA's main climate change website homepage, apparently only the term climate equity was removed. The rest of the info and links stayed.
Okay.
And the main landing pages for climate change on the Bureau of Land Management and Department of Energy websites also seem to have no visible alterations at that time. So variable, as the report said.
Okay. But when it comes to the language used, similar to EJ, how were terms changed to perhaps downplay or obscure climate change?
There was definitely a shift towards vaguer terms again, yeah. obscuring those explicit climate connections. FEMA, for instance, renamed its climate resilience page to Future Conditions.
Future conditions, very neutral.
Very neutral. And they removed some, but not all, mentions of climate change on that page. The EPA replaced climate change and environmental justice with disaster resilience, community engagement on one specific page.
Right.
More thorough example, the EPA's Creating Resilient Water Utilities page. There, they replaced all mentions of climate change with near and longer-term weather variability throughout the entire page.
Weather variability. Okay.
And the Department of Transportation swapped global climate change for future environmental conditions. It's a pattern of dilution.
It sounds like they're trying to sort of sever the connection, make climate change seem like just isolated weather events, not this overarching systemic issue.
And what's really fascinating, as the report notes, is this tactic frames climate as just a singular issue. It obscures the fact that it's an interconnected problem that needs approaches across different sectors.
Can you give an example of that disconnection?
Sure. The EPA had a page on natural disasters and underground storage tanks. It used to have a paragraph in resources explaining how climate change events like more intense storms or floods specifically impact those storage tank sites, increasing risks.
Okay, that makes sense.
That paragraph in those resources, deleted. So by removing that specific connection, it makes it harder for you to understand how climate change actually exacerbates existing vulnerabilities in, say, infrastructure or public safety.
Right. Okay, so let's step back and compare the second Trump administration versus the first one. How does it stack up based on these findings? Was it kind of a similar playbook, or are we seeing bolder, more aggressive moves this time?
Well, there are definite similarities in the overall playbook. Both administrations use similar tactics. Changing words, reducing access, deleting content, and often as part of a broader deregulatory agenda. Things like reconsidering the greenhouse gas reporting program, the Clean Air Act endangerment finding, the Clean Water Act, NEPA rules.
And website changes often foreshadowed policy changes back then too, right?
Exactly. We saw that pattern in the first term, like the EPA's Clean Power Plan website redirecting right before the repeal announcement. And now, the report notes the EnviroFacts greenhouse gas overview page became inaccessible just before the administration announced it was reconsidering the greenhouse gas reporting program itself. So that link seems consistent.
Okay, so the pattern holds,
Yeah.
but what are the key differences? What makes this second term feel more intense based on the report?
Well, first, the rhetoric is definitely dialed up. The first administration talked about energy independence. The second talks about energy dominance.
Right.
The first EPA had a back-to-basics theme. The second launched the Great American Comeback.
Right.
But more substantively, the second administration has explicitly targeted information about marginalized populations and the very existence of systemic environmental racism. That was largely untouched, or at least not targeted so directly in the first term.
And the pace. You mentioned that 70% increase in changes earlier. Does that hold true specifically for areas like environmental justice? Was it just faster across the board?
The pace and scope have dramatically increased, yes. Remember, 70% more significant changes in the first 100 days, even with EDGI monitoring fewer pages. The eradication of EJ information was incredibly swift and thorough.
Right, you said mid-February for all federal EJ sites gone.
Exactly. Most EJ and DEI language removed within days or weeks. And many of those resources, like the EPA's EJ subdomain, which had actually grown a lot since 2008, they existed through the entire first term without major alterations, then were completely removed in 2025.
And for climate change, was the removal of those big sites like globalchange.gov and climate.gov also faster and more thorough this time around?
Yes. The report indicates the suppression of climate info has also been faster and more thorough in the second term. Those major sites, globalchange.gov and climate.gov, were largely unaltered during the first term. While some EPA climate info remains, the general trend is towards quicker, more aggressive removal of these long-standing, really critical public resources.
What about the data itself? That seems different from just changing words on a web page or removing a page. Did the report find a shift in how actual data was treated?
Absolutely. That's a key distinction. In the first term, data often just stagnated. For example, the EPA's climate indicators data stayed online but just wasn't updated after 2016.
Okay, so neglect, basically.
More like neglect, yeah. But in the second term, the report details outright removal and undermining of data collection and production.
Like what?
Well, the EPA deleted its online risk management plan database, the RMP database.
And that's important because
It has huge environmental justice implications. It detailed hazardous materials stored at industrial facilities and the potential exposure risks for nearby communities, which are often low-income or minority communities. Removing public access to that data is significant.
wow, okay.
Also, NOAA's billion-dollar disasters data, the crucial data set tracking costly weather and climate events. The report says it will stop being updated. And there's active defunding mentioned for key research programs. The USGCRP, EPA's Office of Research and Development, NOAA's Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Office. This targets the very creation and ongoing availability of essential scientific data.
This paints a very clear picture. Information control as a deliberate political strategy. How does the report frame this? Does it connect it to broader ideas about how knowledge itself is shaped or suppressed?
It does. It explains that information suppression is really a core component of controlling the narrative. And controlling the narrative is, a central political strategy for this administration, according to EDGI's analysis. It's about molding public opinion, shaping what people consider to be true.
This raises a really important question. How do scholars even study this kind of thing? And what are the implications for us, for the public?
Well, scholars actually study what they call epistemologies of ignorance.
Epistemologies of ignorance.
Yep, it sounds academic, but the idea is simple. It's not just about a lack of information, like forgetting something. It's the active construction of ignorance. This happens both by removing factual information.
Like deleting websites or data.
Exactly. And by actively introducing information that denies those facts or promotes alternative narratives. Research has shown, for instance, that people who know less about certain historical events are, statistically, less likely to perceive systemic racism today.
So there's a direct link between controlled information and public perception.
That's the implication. This constructed ignorance, as the scholars call it, hinders our collective ability to address critical issues. It undermines democratic processes, environmental governance. If you don't have the full picture, or if key pieces are deliberately removed or distorted, how can you possibly make informed decisions or hold power accountable?
It sounds like there are layers to this suppression. Explicit orders, but also maybe more subtle, implicit pressures.
Yes, the report distinguishes between those. Explicitly, you have direct mandates right there in executive orders, like the USDA being ordered to archive or unpublish any landing pages focused on climate change.
Right.
Clear instruction.
Right.
Or EO 14168, defending women from gender ideology extremism, which directed agencies to remove all statements that promote or otherwise inculcate gender ideology.
Very direct.
And the implicit side.
Implicitly, agencies often referenced compliance with these EOs as the reason for website changes, even when the EO didn't specifically mandate that exact change. For example, FEMA put a general banner on its pages about complying with EOs. NOAA cited an EO as justification for its climate.gov redirect.
Ah, I see.
And sometimes, according to the report, agency personnel themselves might remove language they perceive as politically taboo, perhaps trying to keep essential programs running by flying under the radar, so to speak.
And these website changes, they aren't just isolated digital events, are they? The report suggests they often signal bigger things to come. That's a really chilling pattern identified in the report, yeah. These website changes have often preceded and acted as indicators of major staffing and policy shifts down the line.
Like what?
Like the EPA's EJ Screen tool being removed,
Mm-hmm.
followed by EJ staff being placed on administrative leave, followed by termination notices for those staff,
Wow.
or the HHS Office of Climate Change and Health Equity website being removed, then its staff put on leave, then the entire office being shuttered. The climate.gov redirect happened just before the content staff were terminated.
So the digital changes are like the canary in the coal mine for broader structural shifts.
It certainly seems that way based on these examples. They appear deeply intertwined with a larger agenda, acting as these visible signals of deeper changes happening within the agencies.
And finally, just briefly, the report puts this into a global context. How does this kind of information control in the U.S. compare to what we might see elsewhere?
Yeah, the report briefly touches on that. It notes that information suppression is, of course, a tactic seen in authoritarian regimes globally. Places like Turkey or Hungary are mentioned as examples.
Right.
However, it suggests the U.S. context is somewhat distinct. Here, it involves removing access to taxpayer-funded research and data, often to align public information with the administration's specific viewpoints or policy goals, rather than, say, solely focusing on promoting a positive image of a leader or party. It's a different flavor, perhaps, but the impact on public knowledge and the ability to hold government accountable can end up being quite similar.
We have covered a lot of ground today. Just to recap the main points, EDGI's report documents how the second Trump administration has swiftly, broadly, and deeply altered and removed significant amounts of federal environmental information, particularly hitting environmental justice and climate change hard.
And these changes appear bolder and faster than what EDGI observed during the first Trump administration.
And this matters deeply to you, our listeners, because trustworthy public information isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental. It's crucial for a functioning democracy and for your ability to make informed decisions about issues that directly affect your communities, your health, your future.
Absolutely. Without that accessible, reliable information, public participation and oversight become incredibly difficult.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a provocative thought to leave you with. In an age drowning in information, yet also facing targeted information suppression, what is your role? What's your responsibility in actively seeking out, verifying, and perhaps even preserving accurate authoritative knowledge? How do we, collectively and individually, ensure we have the information needed for a healthy democracy and a healthy environment when the sources themselves are in flux?